It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. No notes. No notes. I have no notes. 10 out of 10. A+++ would watch again.
Pretty good.
Anyway, as I said, I'm Johnny. He's George. Forgive me on this Dubcast for my voice, which is like kind of slowly leaving me. I'm Captain Trips is writing again, and I'm sick again, so that's cool. But I had a great time this weekend watching, I would say, probably as complete a game as I've seen from Ohio State in a while. Like, I don't, like, again, no notes. Like, I don't know what else you could add. I don't know what else you could say to that they could have improved upon that much.
We're going to talk about it for 30 minutes.
But we're going to talk about it for 30 minutes. Well, we can just talk about how much we enjoy about it. Look, the first thing I wanted to say relative to this game in general is that Chip Kelly is absolutely living his best life. This is a guy who doesn't have to talk to people. I mean, he does. He does. You know, he's got to talk to the team or whatever, but he doesn't have to explain.
He's got Will Howard gesturing at him from the field with like 2 thumbs up and whatever.
Yeah, he's like, great job. Thanks, Chief.
Yeah,
and
that's the extent of the communication he has with, a person's face.
Right. So he's up in the booth. He gets to do whatever crazy calls he wants to do. He doesn't have to explain himself. He doesn't have to, do all this media crap that he had to do at UCLA. He gets to sit in a booth in a chair with a bunch of stuff in front of him and then make great play calls. And he did that on Saturday. And I would argue that he's been doing that since the beginning of the season. Now, again, this is all relative to the competition that we've seen, right? This is not a situation where he's really had to out scheme, a brilliant defensive mind yet. We'll see what that looks like maybe a little bit later on in the season. But
do you think this is a product of Ryan Day just knowing maybe how obnoxious Chip Kelly is from the New Hampshire days and saying, I want you, you're good at what you do, but I want you up and out of earshot so I just don't have to, deal with your
I think this is Chip Kelly. I think that's
nonsense.
What Chip Kelly wants to do. I think that's, like I said, that's him living his best life.
So it's Chip Kelly saying, Ryan, you're too much of a head case, and I'm going to be in a position where I can look down upon you and cast judgment.
Yeah, let's create some animosity here. We're not No, I truly believe
that's what you have to do with a 56-0 blowout.
Yeah. Right. No, I think that's just the way he wants to do it, and I think for a guy like him who revels in the minutia of spacing and figuring out plays and all this stuff, that's how he wants to watch this game. That's how he wants to respond to whatever the defense is giving him. And he had, the Jeremiah Smith touchdown, the one that went 70 yards, where it really, the first part of the play was great scheming on the part of Chip Kelly, right? Where you have this pre-snap movement that kind of gets everybody thinking that it's going to be another one of these screens or just a simple like little out route or whatever. And then instead it becomes this kind of like tunnel play where, Jeremiah Smith ends up cutting across 2 dudes. And you're like, okay, the first 10 yards of that is all Chip Kelly. And then the next 60 yards is just Jeremiah Smith being, otherworldly. But he loves that stuff. And we have seen several points during the past 2 games where Chip Kelly is like, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, just on his shit. Like this is him just kind of being really, I think, excited about the tools that he has. And you saw that too with Quinn Judkins, where, again, the first 4 or 5 yards was Chip Kelly designing an incredible play, and then Judkins just, being amazing and every bit the player that I have always said he is, right? So we'll get to that in a second.
Run the tape on that.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, first Jeremiah Smith, he continues to be a menace. He could start in the NFL right now. He's unbelievably fast.
Come on. Like, we're 2 games against MAC teams into this, and we're already going that far.
Yes, I am.
I mean, look, the early returns have been excellent. Yeah. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that he is one of the best receivers in college football already. Like, I didn't even want to go that far with him in the preseason with all the hype. And right. I think even I'm willing to say that at this point based on how the first 2 games have gone. but the guy is 18 years old.
I think he's really good.
You can't say he's ready to start for an NFL team right now.
I think that is
an absurd
wide
statement.
receiver in the NFL right now. No, I'm kidding. I think he. I don't know, man. I think he could. His speed, his size.
I think he could
6'3".
compete for a starting job, but I mean, to say that you could just slot him in right now as a starter for an NFL team is
would the Browns take, or not the Browns? Would the Bears take him?
Well, they just put Rome Odunze on IR, so or not on IR, but he's like week to week with like an MCL thing. So maybe, but I mean that's also getting into the weird like. Do you count your wide receiver 3 as a starting receiver thing, or is it really the top 2 guys? So, I mean, but that's getting way into the weeds about a hypothetical question that doesn't really matter. The point is, Jeremiah Smith's very good, and he's at least good enough at this stage right now where there's not really going to be a lot that teams can do relative to covering him further than doubling up assignments on the guy in order to try to mitigate the damage he can
211 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 games. That's pretty damn
those
good.
Chris Carter receiving records are going out the window. Yeah. And he's totally cool with it to the point where he had to remind people this weekend that his teams used to run the ball 45 to 50 times.
Yeah, he's super cool with it. Yeah. Which is funny because I think he, like, Chris Carter probably is cool with it, but also like he's Chris Carter, so he's like, come on, man.
Well, he's made peace with it. He's like, I knew this was going to happen, but I just need to make sure that when it happens, people have all the context for why it has happened.
Yes, you mentioned my name a couple, which, you know what, fair to him. I mean, he was pretty incredible as a freshman. So Jeremiah Smith kicking ass, he's great. We're all about that. Quinshon Judkins, and in all honesty, I was skeptical of this guy simply because I don't think he performed super well last year, at least in terms on a carry-to-carry basis. That was stupid of me, at least in reflection of on Saturday.
Johnny, we're only 2 games in, and it's not like both of those games went swimmingly for him. He got more touches than Travion against Akron, who appears to be a worse team. And did nothing with them.
Yeah, I mean, Judkins, the thing about Judkins is that if you look at his career overall, right? Like, I mean, this is a guy he's been around a minute, right? Going to Ole Miss, and at Ole Miss, he really was kind of the featured back. There were games where he would just pop off, where he was like unbelievably good and, clearly a huge part of why Ole Miss won those games. And then there would be other games where they give him the ball 15, 18 times or whatever, and he would rush for 3 carries a pop and do basically nothing. So, there is kind of this boom bust quality about the guy, but he still rushed for over 100 yards. I think like 12 yards carry, basically. They negated on a very ticky-tack holding penalty, an 80-yard touchdown that he should have had. Like, I think that's ridiculous that they called that. But what impresses me most, I think, is that, and what gives me a lot of confidence, not just in him, but also just the running game in general, is that these guys aren't really having to do a whole lot of work before they get to the linebackers. You know what I mean? Like, there's occasionally, there are occasional blocking breakdowns and things like that. But the way this is being schemed up is it's getting them into space. They don't have to make a ton of dudes miss in the backfield or anything like that. They can just go ahead and plow forward. And both of them, both Judkins and Henderson, are strong enough and fast enough to get 3, 4, 5 extra yards, at the point of contact. And so if that point of contact isn't until you're already 2 or 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, then that's it. That's game over. So I just think that the way the running game is working in relation to the passing game right now is just really, really on point. And, again, relative to competition, we can keep saying that. But as far as the way it's being schemed, I think it benefits both of these guys. And I know we were talking about this in the context of, like, you got the thunder and lightning, that kind of thing. I just think it's Chip Kelly has said this. It's like the running game is the running game. Whoever's in there is going to be doing the same stuff. And I kind of believe him. That's what it looks like. It really does look like that. And right now it's functioning at a really high level.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the thunder and lightning thing relative to them because I think part of the reason that Judkins had a more effective game than he did against Akron is because the offensive line was markedly improved, I think, this week as opposed to against Akron. I wonder how much of that is a reflection of, Donovan Jackson being available, who is, presumably, not only preseason All-American, but by many people's accounts, the best lineman that they have on the team. So you would think that guy returning to the guard position would presumably improve the overall output of that unit. I know that the early returns on Seth McLaughlin at center as an improvement over what Carson Hinsman provided last year, despite the fact that Hinsman at times was the most impressive performer on that line at certain stages last year, in spite of his inexperience. Had really good positive returns as well. I think it's kind of tough to gauge the effectiveness of a offensive line just in terms of numbers relative to other teams until you've got about a month of data into the season, right, especially because so many teams are not playing competitive football yet. And I know that's not the case for every highly ranked team, but I think you can certainly make that case for Ohio State just based on the non-conference schedule this year. And the other side of that I would say too is that Travion, I think, is a running back whose performance is less tied to the effectiveness of the offensive line than Judkins is, just based on the running style.
Yeah, especially when he's in space. And they get him on the edge, and that's right, really what you want for him.
Even though, as you said, Judkins had an 80-yard touchdown taken away from him in this game, and he had multiple scores from, I believe, more than 15 yards out in this game, even without having that other touchdown taken away. Most people would agree that the guy that's the bigger play, the more home run threat, the bigger threat in open space and open field is Travion Henderson.
Right.
So as the offensive line improves, you would think that a guy with the kind of running style that Judkins has would have a more effective game in congruency with the improvement of the offensive line play.
I would also, just to interrupt just real quick, I before I forget, and this is something that I wanted to just praise the team as well. It's not just the offensive line play that I think has been pretty good. It's also, in terms of blocking, the wide receivers have been blocking really well. The tight ends in particular. Obviously we kind of ragged on Cade Silver for not being a great blocking tight end, but I think like Guy Scott and some of these other guys have done a really good job at sealing the edges, particularly when they have those, those like end arounds or whatever, when they split it out wide to Henderson. The blocking overall, I think, has improved since last year. Not from the non-offensive line guys, the wide receivers, the tight ends, everybody seems to be like really locking in on their dudes.
What I'm hoping for, going the rest of the way, I was a little bit concerned with how, they weren't really blending the usage of Henderson and Judkins in the Akron game. It was more like going drive for drive. And then eventually they started meshing them together a little bit more. And I think they did more of that in this game too. But the flip side of that is that there's many people that would argue that it's good to keep it on a drive by drive basis because you have running backs that start to get, I guess, a better sense and groove for responding to what the defense is doing to try to stop them, during that series specifically. And we're recording this Monday night, so most of the NFL slates already happened. We're recording this as Monday Night Football is taking place. So the most recent NFL game to finish right before this was Sunday Night Football with the Detroit Lions and the Los Angeles Rams. And the what ended up making the difference down the stretch for the Lions in that case was they had not necessarily utilized David Montgomery like for any solid drive. I don't think even in the second half or for most of that game, they had mostly leaned on Jahmyr Gibbs. But when they got to overtime and they won the coin toss and they got the ball first, they knew at that point that they said, okay, we have the momentum because we scored the last points in this game. And we know that the Rams defense at this point is tired. So we're just going to give the ball to Dave Montgomery like 9 times.
Right.
And we're just going to punch them in the mouth the whole way down into the end zone and win the game. And that's exactly what they did.
Right.
And they just had Montgomery running like a freight train the rest of the way. So I think Ohio State is capable of handling good teams in the exact same fashion as how the Lions won that game last night, where you have Henderson operating in that Jahmyr Gibbs role where they're saying we're giving you the most explosive, we're going to tire you out having to hound down the most explosive option we have at running back for most of the night, and then we'll spell that guy with the power threat. And then as we get into the fourth quarter and you're not coming at us as like effectively as you were in the first quarter, we put in the guy that is fresh. In this case, it would be Judkins playing the Montgomery role, and we can just run it down your throat and get the necessary yards that we need to either seal a victory or just put the game on ice generally. So I think they're capable of that, and they've been big on playing an NFL style for years. And I see that potential with this backfield in a way that I haven't really been comfortable with saying this early on, that they'd be able to do so for a while.
And the thing I like about that is that with Will Howard, right, like you're kind of get what you get. I mean, Will Howard showed his wheels.
And Jared Goff ain't running it like Will Howard.
That's right.
So,
well,
that's an even added bonus for
that's
Ohio
an added
State.
bonus. The other thing is that if Will Howard has had an off night, right, like let's say the dude's, he's having one of those nights where he's only hitting 50% of his passes, he makes some dumb mistakes. You have the running backs and the capability of winning a game on the ground if that part of the offense just isn't working. That's obviously not an ideal situation, but because of that elite talent, because you have 2 guys who can really sustain that, that makes it a viable path forward. And that's cool because you don't have to lean on one guy or one aspect of the offense to really just kind of carry everything or hope that everything is working in concert. And we'll actually get to a team that is in a similar situation, but on the bad way of that a little bit later, where it's like, they're really worried about not one thing not working because they know that the other thing isn't good enough to support it. So we'll talk about that.
Guess who it is?
Yeah, I'm sure anybody could guess who it is. Will Howard. Will Howard had a good game. It was cool when they brought in the backups. It was funny because Devin Brown had a series where he threw 2 passes in a row that were like frozen ropes, and you're like, oh, this is like a Happy learned how to putt situation, right? And then the next series it was like, oh, okay, never mind, that was kind of maybe not. They brought in Julian Sayin. He looked good. He threw a little bloop over to Bennett Christensen, I think, or Christian Bennett.
I have to say, I feel like I have to be the responsible adult in the room saying this, that I absolutely hated that call. Going for it on 4th and 1 in your own half with 5 minutes left in the game, up 49-0. I mean, it's like killing Bambi. Like, well, I called it a war crime when it happened. It's just so unnecessary.
My favorite part
Good
about
for
that,
saying getting that, but it's like I would have been, I think, justifiably upset if I was the Western Michigan coach with that call.
Yeah.
That's not you like, oh, we're just trying to get the third string guys experience. Just punt the ball. You're up 49-0 and it's 4th down in your own half.
Well, the funniest part
if
about
you don't
that
get that, you jeopardize the shutout.
Yeah, which they hadn't. That was the other. So we're going to talk about the defense here in a second. But that was their first shutout since 2019. Obviously a big deal for the defense. You want to get that. My favorite part about that play was Carlos Lachlan, the running backs coach, in the background, losing his mind.
Yeah, he had the same reaction that I did. Although he probably would have been fine if they had just called a running play.
No, that's what he wanted. That's what he wanted, because it was like 4th and 1. You're like, what are you doing? And then, of course, it ended up being a touchdown or whatever. But Julian said, I mean, you didn't see a ton from that dude, but that was a cool moment. They, risky, but I'm glad they got it. And for Bennett Christian, I mean, that was his first touchdown as a college athlete. I think that was cool that you got that to him, especially on like a 55-yard touchdown play like that. That's pretty sweet. But overall, like I said, everything about the offense was just working perfectly. I mean, they did have some.
I also hate that Lincoln Kienholz got in ahead of Aaron Noland.
Kienholz, yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand that at all.
I mean,
like, you're basically screaming at Noland to hit the portal at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what they just expect. But it is what it is, and I think when you've got that much talent in the quarterback room, I feel like that's just gonna happen. It's a product of it. The defense, I mean, they had one 55-yard drive that they allowed at the beginning of the game. It resulted in a missed field goal. They doinked it off the one of the pylons there. And then after that, they only allowed 45 yards.
That's
Pylons?
a pretty wide miss.
What? No, it doinked it.
The upright. Sir.
The upright. There we go. Sorry. Yeah, they doinked it off the upright. And that was it. They allowed 45 yards for the rest of the game after that. That was it. So, like I mean, and it's, in the show rundown here, I got welcome back Cody Simon. He got a sack. That was sweet. He looked fine. He looked every bit game ready as anybody else. He looked great. Jack Sawyer was active. He did a lot of really great stuff. Tumaloau did great. There's nothing. I mean, again, no notes. One thing that I hadn't seen from the team that I was really hoping for was Caleb Downs do something crazy. And then there was that one play where he came in like a freaking rocket, and just, there was a guy who had probably 5-6 yards of open ground in front of him. And Caleb Downs came in at 1 trillion miles per hour and stopped him for no gain. And it was unbelievable. So I wanted to see something like that from the dude. It felt like he hadn't had many, huge plays. And that was a pretty crazy one. But yeah, man, like they were active in the backfield, tons of sacks, no interceptions this time, but it's fine. No reason to make my prediction look any worse than it already was. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, this offense, or excuse me, this defense doesn't feel like it has a lot of flaws. I don't know what else you can say. I mean, Denzel Burke got ejected for a really BS targeting call. He'll be back, luckily, next time.
Those never happen to Ohio State.
Yeah, right. Which is weird because
had one against Akron too.
Oh my god! The one against Western Michigan was particularly egregious in its stupidity. That should not have been a targeting call. Yeah, there was a lot of dumb stuff happening there. But even without him, it didn't matter.
When has an Ohio State corner named Denzel ever been thrown out for targeting under BS pretenses? That's right. Never happens.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, first shutout.
In speaking about predictions, yeah. I said 42-7 just because I came away. I guess we had a higher opinion of Wisconsin than they really deserved going into the season.
Yeah.
Because, not only did they only handle South Dakota 27-13 while this game was going on, but also, I mean, what we thought they were capable of influenced my opinion that, okay, this team is at least going to be better than Akron and therefore more competitive. And
right.
Ohio State needed two defensive touchdowns, one of which was really more of a garbage time score, to break 50 points.
To break 40 points. I mean, if they didn't have those.
Two defensive touchdowns to break 40 points, right?
Right.
So I figured, I think they're just going to try to get in the end zone. And I came away thinking that Western Michigan, at least in the early stages of the game, was going to be competitive enough that they were going to be able to surprise with an early touchdown through the effectiveness of their running game while they were still in a position where they didn't just have to throw to keep up, or that they were going to get some kind of garbage time score.
Right.
And that didn't really end up being the case. Again, they had that drive early in the game where they showed some effectiveness that I thought, okay, they might get their touchdown out of this early on. But as you pointed out, after that field goal miss, they only had 45 total yards the rest of the game, and they finished with less than 100 total yards of offense, which is just an absurd stat for
in 2024. Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's a ridiculous stat no matter what. But in the year of our Lord 2024, that's something that is basically unheard of.
And that's something to be celebrated, even in a blowout. That like a shutout against any team, any FBS level team by another FBS level team, if you're a fan of the winning team, is something to be celebrated. So this is, even though it's probably hard to feel good about, as I alluded to earlier, killing Bambi, this was something worth being proud of if you're an Ohio State fan. That bodes well for the rest of the season. Even though we knew how good this defense was, seeing it live up to expectations in that sort of fashion is an extremely rare moment of total satisfaction that you get as an Ohio State fan. So
Ohio State
cherish it during this bye week.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, because we get 2 whole weeks to think about this.
That's right.
Number 1 in the country in yards per play allowed, 2.46 yards per play for Ohio State. That's pretty wild. I was looking at the bottom. New Mexico at the bottom of that list, allowing 8.78 yards per play.
Nice.
Just so you can, get some perspective on how bad it could actually be.
Michigan, it's like I said with the running game. If you're giving up less than 3.4 in this case, that means you're not allowing a first down on average. So
you're pretty much doing what you got to do.
That's if you want a good defense, it seems like that should be the standard. So if you're even lower, you said it's 2.83 for Ohio State.
Well, for all plays, Ohio State is averaging 2.46 yards per play.
I mean, that's wild. Not even 2.5 yards per play. That's a great stat through 2 weeks, even against Akron and Western Michigan.
Yeah, 1.14 yards per rushing attempt, which again, it's 2 weeks, but still, I think it's an indicator. The thing that surprised me a little bit about this team's defense is how deep they are on the defensive line rotation. That is the one thing that I don't think I did expect. I thought there would be fall off when they had to rotate guys in and out, particularly when like JT and Sawyer were out or whatever. That doesn't seem to be the case at all. I mean, Tyleek is really. I mean, we knew Tyleek was great, right? That's not a surprise to anybody. But a lot of the other dudes on the line, Ty Hamilton is like all over the freaking place.
He was the defensive player of the game.
He was really good. Mitchell Melton is active. I mean, a lot of these guys on the line. Edric Houston, when they come in, there's very little drop off. There is very, very little drop off there. And that again is like, that's the difference between a really good defense and an elite defense. And that to me is a very good sign. That bodes very well going forward, not just for the rest of the season, but into next season as well. So I'm excited about that. I'm not excited that we have a freaking bye week 2 weeks into the football season. That is stupid. Like, I don't know why anybody would schedule something like that. I think it's unbelievable, but whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah, I have to work this weekend, so I'll take it.
All right, well, fair enough. Makes weekend editing a little bit less, a little more bearable, I guess. So I'm cool with that. You know what? For you, George, I'll be cool with it. How about that?
Aww,
so yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So it was a great win. Again, first shutout since 2019, less than 100 yards allowed.
A solid dub.
I'll take it. Let's do Ask Us Anything. Before we do that, we remind you that the Dry Goods Store is our sponsor for the Dubcast. So drygoods.11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers. Check them out. They're great. We got a lot of new stuff. I had a suggestion. So what we do is, a lot of people don't know this.
Knock off Stanley's?
No, we're not doing
the South Carolina Ohio State Alumni Association.
Shout out to those guys. No, so as one of the co-owners, I frequently have input into our shirts and things like that. And I thought I had a pretty good idea for a Michigan shirt. So should Ohio State take it to the Wolverines later on this year, and you see a really cool shirt, a new one coming out from Eleven Dubcast, that just might be a Johnny Ginter special. So just throwing that out there. Let's do.
Did you submit our Stallions vacuum salesman LLC employee shirt idea?
That one I don't believe is on the docket, unfortunately. Although that one's pretty good.
Did you even bring it up?
I did bring it up, but here's the thing: if something comes, so like let's say the NOA is leaked and like it ends up being super crazy. I feel like that's back on the table. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so let's do Ask Us Anything. You can ask us literally anything by sending us questions to dubcast@11warriors.com. First of all, Total Apex Sports, Kevin, frequent listener, writer, Ask Us Anything, or Kevin has got a job at Total Apex Sports. That's cool. So check him out there. He has he had a concern about Air Noland as well. So he said, like, are we keeping an eye on the situation? Is this a kind of a countdown to transfer, I guess? And to your point earlier, George, I mean, maybe, honestly, now,
yeah, I mean, I don't want to believe that. Again, I'm the guy that got on this show after the Mizzou game and said Air Noland 2024 half jokingly, but like that playing 4 quarterbacks in a game that you're winning 56-0 and none of them are named Air Noland is kind of the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
When you're a former 5-star recruit.
Yeah, and Lincoln Keenholz, I mean, as much as I like the guy, talent-wise, not probably a guy who was expected to compete for time, before Air Noland. So, writing's kind of on the wall. It sucks, but when there's that much talent in the room, I think that's kind of the way it goes. This is from Bryant, who has a couple questions, just quick ones here. So, other than Brutus, what is your favorite on-field or on-court college mascot?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
I'm a big live mascot guy. I like anything where there's like animals, that are probably shouldn't be in an environment like that, but they bring into an environment like that anyway. Ralphie is my favorite at Colorado, which is why I want part of the reason why I want Colorado to be successful. But I just love that they roll on a live bison onto the field. I think that rules. He's super high up there, and then any of the dogs, right? Like Uga or whatever they call the Washington Husky. I'm all about the live mascots. That's my jam.
Now, this is tough because I have so many more mascots that I have great disdain for than ones.
Who's your least favorite? Who's your least favorite?
It's the Friar from Providence.
Okay.
I know it's not college.
That is ultra specific.
The most terrifying thing about him is that his mouth is just agape.
Oh yeah.
Like if you saw a picture of him and you imagine that thing like standing at the end of your bed, it's the most horrifying. There's no other mascot that would be nearly as horrifying. Like you would feel like that.
I don't know. Purdue Pete, I feel like would give him a pretty good run for his money.
It's close, but Purdue Pete doesn't have his mouth agape.
That's true.
But Purdue Pete is definitely in that same.
He's got those horrifying eyes that just like stare into your soul.
Right. I also like the animal. When you were saying live mascots, I thought, okay, the animals, yeah, that's fine. I hate when the mascots are just like people doing like cosplay.
Yes, same. I hate that crap.
My lone exception is probably the West Virginia Mountaineer, but even then, I feel like they could do something so much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
With like an actual Mountaineer mascot than just have a guy wearing a raccoon carcass on his head and other various furs, walking around with a Revolutionary War firearm. I hate the Notre Dame leprechaun.
One of my least
just
favorite.
A guy.
One of my least favorite.
I hate that the Trojan is just a guy wearing Roman garb. It's they could do so much better than that with those kind of characters that they have as mascots, and it feels like kind of a cheap way to save money or something. Is just instead of actually getting a suit and branding and stuff, we just
the Fighting Irish
some guy dress up as it.
The thing about the Fighting Irish that really bothers me is that, like, okay, with the Mountaineers, it's like, all right, well, this is like some kind of country guy. He's got a musket, and it kind of like harkens back to people out in the backwoods or whatever. And with the Trojans, okay, all right, well, this is like an ancient, warrior or something like that. With the Irish, it's like, well, here's a guy who might be from Ireland. Maybe he's a leprechaun. I don't know. Like, he's got a shillelagh, and it's like, it doesn't. There's nothing intimidating. It's like some nerd, and you're like, go away, nerd. Like it's the same thing with Stanford's tree, their tree mascot, where it's like, oh, let's be ironic about this and make it as crappy as
nobody
possible.
Taller than Simone Biles should be allowed to be the leprechaun for Notre Dame either.
That's right. Yeah, it ruins the immersion. I'm not a fan.
Exactly. It's not an authentic representation.
Yeah,
it's Irish discrimination, and I would know.
That's right. But like I said, any live animals, any live mascots, I'm all about. I think those are a lot of fun, and the weirder the better. Frankly, like Bevo when they bring in the gigantic, Longhorn cattle, like that's great. I love that stuff.
You know what my favorite is?
Who?
It's the Toledo mascot. That's basically a Power Ranger. That's my favorite one, other than Brutus. That thing is so cool. I don't know what its name is. I don't know. I don't even know. Like, they're the mud hens. It has absolutely nothing to do with mud hens, but it just looks so they did the right thing. They said, look, there's no way we're going to be able to sell mud hens. So what's the coolest possible thing we could do with that Toledo Power Ranger? Just put them out there, visor and all. Kids will love it. And you know what? They knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I'll fight Rita Repulsa and get the putties, and you're good. I also like Puddles. I think Puddles is pretty good. I like Goldie.
I mean, for all the gimmicks he does, he's great.
Yeah, I like
in terms of behavior. He's one of the best. I think
the let me in stuff that they were doing at the beginning of the season with Puddles was really funny. Where he went to every place and like, let me in.
I wish they had gone a little bit more leaned into the spying stuff with Michigan though.
That would have been really funny.
Arbor.
Yeah,
I mean, that would have been really funny.
That would have been good.
They did a great job.
Second question from Brian is, what's your favorite shirt in the dry goods store? I have a couple. So I think people knowing my background say, oh, well, it's got to be the Sherman undefeated at a conference.
I mean, that's what mine is.
It's really good. I feel like we could have done better on the design. I don't like the idea of just like a square on a white. I feel like we can do a second version of that, a second pass. It's maybe a little more kick-ass. I love the Ohio Moon tee. I think that's freaking sweet. That one's really high up there for me. The Anti-Wolverine Social Club is really high up there for me. And there was another one. I got this pulled up. There was another one that Afro. I still love the Afro Duck the t-shirt.
Doesn't?
I don't know that we still have that one available, but Afro Duck was that lives on in my heart, so I appreciate that one. And then Kevin's got another one. Do you listen to other Ohio State podcasts? Is that part of our
No,
overview?
And I've thought about working one in, maybe at least. I think out of respect, I should start listening to Real Pod Wednesdays, because I'm pretty sure Dan listens to us.
Dan not only listens to us, but he consumes every bit of content that's published on 11warriors.com.
Yeah,
he's read.
So I don't know if maybe they assumed we were listening to them and they're going to take it as disrespect that at least I don't. I don't know. If
there's probably this ongoing feud that they're having where they're just absolutely talking smack on us every single week.
Yeah,
we're just completely unaware.
There is. We call them Fake Pod Wednesdays, and they call us the Dumbcast. So that's
I feel like they lost before they started on that one, because that's.
Oh, I mean, our scoring predictions blew theirs out of the water last year. We proved beyond a shadow of a doubt last year the Dubcast knows ball. So if you want beat journalism or whatever, go to them. If you want real authentic interpretation
from the streets
of what actually takes place on the field, you listen to the 11 Dubcast.
You listen to the 11 Dubcast.
So if I were to branch out, I would start with their show. I'll be honest, and I'm sorry, dear Jason, if you're listening to this. I haven't tuned into the 11 Warriors show. But those were the two that I would probably start with, because I'm a company man. So there's that.
I just I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, period. Honestly, I'm just not a big podcast dude.
Well, so this is my other thing, is that and I've briefly talked about it before, that my my other gig that I do relative to sports is entirely centered around the UFC. I listen to, there's part of what I do in terms of comparing my reads to the reads of other people is I have 3 different podcasts that I listen to that before every event, and there's an event every week.
Right.
So
you got a lot.
already listened to
you're
3
going
shows
already.
for that, and I listened to another podcast relative to just like general news happening stuff in the U.S. that's like an hour that's on every day. So I already have a big content schedule. And the thing is, maybe if I didn't have this show, I would feel more compelled to listen to other podcasts about Ohio State football. But because I know I'm going to get on here for an hour every week and talk about it with Johnny anyway, that's kind of my outlet for stuff like that. It's another big reason why I didn't get EA Sports College Football 25, because it's like I don't need to have the fantasy of the Ohio State football experience or like having some sort of attachment to it. I already am.
You live it.
So
baby.
it's great.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of the same way, and no disrespect to the other podcasts out there, like Doug Maurice and the guys. I know they have a really good podcast, and Jeremy Birmingham. Like, not again, no disrespect to any of those dudes. I think they're all pros and great.
Well, we've taken shots at Menace to Sports before.
Well, that's fine. I don't count them. But everybody else, keep it up. You're great. And again, Kevin, great on you getting that job, Total Apex Sports. If you want to check them out, you should do that.
I have to real quick. Yeah. I did used to host a podcast, Ohio State podcast before this. That was called Hang Out in the Holy Land.
That's right. You did.
And I'm not going to go as far as to recommend listening to it now, but even before that, I had another podcast that I hosted called Burn Down the Big Ten with my good friend Ben Gorin. And we did very well for that, just being kind of a spur of the moment launch thing. And then it did well, but then the idea for it was stolen and repurposed into another show that is now hosted by the same platform that hosts Hangout in the Holy Land, and we won't speak their name, but they've rebranded as the I-65 podcast, because that's the highway that has the most resonance with the entire Big Ten, right? So if you're hankering for a fix, for all your Big Ten related headlines, and you don't get enough of that from the Dubcast, maybe there's that outlet for you. I don't know. But generally, you can get all your podcasts you want from 11 Warriors, so why would you go anywhere else, right?
Exactly. Last one here. This is from our good friend Alvin, who wants to know, and this goes back to what I said earlier. So I got my finger on the pulse of Ohio State fandom. Is Jeremiah Smith going to be better than Marvin when all is said and done? You can just say
this is a tricky question, because the thing is, Marv didn't get to debut until the Rose Bowl his freshman year.
Right.
And we know Smith is going to have, on top of whatever he does this season, at least 2 more years of production at Ohio State, assuming he doesn't hit the portal for some unforeseen reason.
Right. So,
I mean, I don't see why the answer wouldn't be yes. And I'll be honest too, like I think Marv gets anointed just because of the ability that we recognize that he had.
Yeah,
he gets, I think, placed further up the pecking order of great Ohio State receivers, not just in recent memory, but like all time, than perhaps maybe he deserves. I think because even though his Rose Bowl was spectacular.
Hey, a lot of people might give you crap for that. I actually don't know that I disagree with that all much. I think I'm kind of with you on that a little bit.
I think honestly, if you want to have a conversation in terms of like putting just production to the side and just talking about like pure ability, the talent is unquestionable.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual returns on production and consistency of output, I think that there's a handful of better names that you can put into that conversation.
No, I
certainly wouldn't place him above Olave or Garrett Wilson in that regard.
Yeah.
And I think that because of the opportunity that Jeremiah Smith has here, he's going to be in the same position very soon.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think that, because of the runway that he's already got, he will surpass Marv in terms of that perception, I think, before he leaves Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like I mean, again, in terms of sheer talent, it's hard to argue that Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't one of the most talented players, wide receivers ever at Ohio State, and then surely one of the top 2 or 3, most talented wide receivers at Ohio State. But in terms of production, that's a different story. And again, some of that's due to situational things, and you don't, but yeah, I don't know. I think there's a fair conversation to have about that. And I think with Jeremiah Smith, you're going to get both. I think you're going to get the obvious talent that everybody's going to see. And you're like, holy crap, this guy just is a black hole that draws attention wherever he is on the field. And because of the fact that he's starting immediately, he's going to have the stats to go along with it. So I mean, again, it's really hard to project
the flip
side
of that conversation is if Jeremiah Smith had Olave and Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba in front of him, would he have the opportunity to do what we perceive he's going to do this season relative to breaking these freshman records and that being the precursor to his next 2 years of production? Because Marv didn't have that opportunity until 2 of those 3 weren't available for the Rose Bowl. And even then, a big part of Marv's production in his sophomore season was Jackson Smith and Jigba getting hurt, and that opening up the opportunity for him to assume the 1A, 1B role behind Emeka Egbuka. So it's definitely a fair point to make if you're a defender of Marv relative to what you think Smith is capable of. But overall, I do think that long-term Smith is probably going to surpass Marv at some point in terms of how he's perceived in the if you're putting together a Mount Rushmore of receivers at Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm with that. So that's Ask Us Anything for this week. Great questions. Keep sending them. Keep asking them. We'll keep answering them. Let's look real quick at the national scene. We're going to start with Michigan because that was the funniest game that I watched this weekend.
All right, go ahead and gloat, Johnny.
Yeah, I'm going to gloat because
I stuck up for them against my better judgment.
Well,
but it's like I've been preaching with Smith, though. It's like you keep your expectations conservative.
Sure. Yeah. And that's fine.
And that's a good hedge, because if you're wrong, you get to revel in the fact that the result you wanted anyway ended up being correct.
That's right. That's
and
right.
If you're right, then
so you're saying you're a coward is what we're going. Okay. Well, that's fair.
You know what? I am a risk considerate coward. That is what I'm a safe coward.
You're prudent. You're a prudent.
You are a dangerous genius.
No, I don't think I'm a dangerous genius for saying that Michigan would get blown out against Texas. And the writing was on the wall, I think, against their first opponent. The thing about Michigan, and they played really poorly.
I don't think everything was on the wall relative to what we saw in the Texas game, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll definitely get into that. The thing for me against Michigan and Texas won 31-12. They were never threatened at all. Michigan only scored 1 touchdown, and that was a garbage time touchdown with 2 minutes left in the game, where Texas had basically given up. They packed the bus at halftime. They could have scored 50 if they felt like it. They didn't feel like it.
They loaded up the Longhorn cattle.
Yeah, that's right. They put Bevo in the train.
Another great animal mascot.
Right. But really, I mean, the story here, I think people understand that the offense for Michigan, at this point, they understand the offense for Michigan is bad, right? The offensive line's not good. They have a quarterback who was essentially a preferred walk-on, who had no real, because of COVID and because of, personal illness they had to deal with, very little scouting in high school. They don't trust Alex Orji to throw the ball at all.
And of course, Johnny's favorite statistic through the 22 weeks of the 2024 season so far is that James Peoples, the third string running back at Ohio State, is outproducing Donovan Edwards.
That's right. Yes. Donovan Edwards actually he was the best running back for Michigan against Texas. He wasn't terrible. He was missing obvious rushing lanes and occasionally running up the back of his own blockers, which is ridiculous. But he was trying. I mean, the guy was running really hard. Only averaged about 5 yards a carry, but still, again, that's better than what you saw out of Michigan's other running backs. Kello Mullings, who's, he's this big bowling ball of a guy, only averaged like 4 yards a carry. But people know that these are known quantities, that you've got a mediocre to bad quarterback. You've got a running back that isn't elite, that isn't very good. You've got wide receivers that are essentially non-existent. I mean, Colston Loveland, their tight end, is great, but he's the only offensive threat that they have, and at any skill position. Their wide receivers are terrible. Texas basically stopped, even pretending that they were on the field at a certain point. They're just like, whatever, we're just going to ignore them. If they get 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, it's man, we don't care. That's all known quantities. What I think Michigan world is freaking out the most about at this point, and I listened to a couple of Michigan podcasts, I read a bunch of Michigan stuff after the game. What they're really freaking out about is the defense. And Wink Martindale took over. Yeah, and Wink Martindale took over as defensive coordinator from Mentor after all those guys went to the NFL with Harbaugh. And Wink, the first thing that he said when he got hired was like, "I'm the OG, baby." And he literally said, "I'm the OG of this." He honest to God, George, he said,
but he didn't say I'm the OG, baby.
He did say
he's the OG.
Yeah, he did say he's the OG.
The baby is important there.
Well, that's true. But he said, "I'm the OG of this defense." And that's true.
Original garbage.
Yeah, that's true that he did kind of originate a lot of the concepts that Michigan had prided themselves on the past several years. But it's also true that he hasn't been in the college game in decades. He was kind of on the way down his coaching career in the NFL.
I'm the OG.
Yeah. And he's got a habit.
It's why you got to watch the show on YouTube, not listen to it on.
Yeah, right.
The
wink doesn't really come across
exactly.
Audibly. Anyway, so his biggest problem is that he gets super cute with what he's trying to do, and he loves to blitz. And Michigan does not have the dogs to do that. They do not have the personnel to blitz as often as they do. They don't have the personnel up and down the defensive line to shuffle guys around as much as he's trying to do. At one point, he put Mason Graham, who is an incredible player, at defensive tackle as an end. And Steve Sarkisian said, "That's stupid," and then just ran away from him for like a 15-yard gain. Because why wouldn't you? Of course you would do that. So they've got a lot of issues in terms of, I think, what Wink Martindale wants to do defensively and the personnel that they actually have to execute that defensive scheme. I don't see that getting much better, but that's shocking to a lot of Michigan people because that's what they felt they could still hang their hat on, right? They brought back all these dudes. They brought back so many guys on defense compared to how much they lost in offense. And like, hey, Iowa did it. They got to the Big Ten championship game last year. We can win 10 games. Right now, it looks like it's going to get a struggle for them to get to 7 or 8 wins.
Well, the pillar of their success the last 3 seasons has been winning consistently at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And I know you've been, at times more critical of their offensive line than perhaps their defensive line. But if we are going to compare the two, then their defensive line has without a doubt been one of, if not the most dominant component of their team during that 3-year run.
Absolutely.
And the point at which I recognized finally, after I had been willing to give them benefit of the doubt, not only before the Fresno State game, but even after that, maybe this team isn't nearly as all the way gone as many Ohio State fans are hoping for, and as many have speculated that they are. The moment that I had realized, okay, this school has fallen from grace relative to where it was in on the field terms, was after they kicked the field goal to make the game 7-3, going into the early stages, opening minutes of the second quarter against Texas. Texas comes out, and Michigan's in a position now where it's like, okay, we got. We gave up a missed field goal first drive. They got in the end zone the next drive. We gotta clip their wings on this drive. Like we really gotta dig our feet in the ground. And if we want to, take the lead back and make the most of the fact that this game is at home and everything, and not let it get away from us, we got to make a stand here. This is what happened. Texas ran for 9 yards. Texas then ran for 6 yards. Texas then had another run for 6 yards. And then they got down to 1st and goal after, and there were, various Quinn Ewers sprinklings of,
yeah. And
11
Quinn
and
Ewers
18
did
yard
not stretch them
completions in
vertically.
there.
I mean, he was just throwing balls, dinking and dunking it, and that was fine.
I mean,
That
he
was all
made
had
some
to do.
incredible throws, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like he was putting out any like 50-yard bombs. And
Right,
this
exactly.
wasn't by any means an air raid assault or
No.
anything.
No.
But they eventually, they get into the red zone. They run for 11 yards. It's 1st and goal. They run for 2 yards on 1st and goal, and then they get a 7-yard rushing touchdown on the play after that.
Right.
So that, I believe, is 5 rushes of 6 or more yards. Might even be 6. No. Yeah, 5 rushes of 6 or more yards on one drive on a 12-play drive. So nearly half of the plays on that drive were plays where they were just getting straight up gashed in the early stages of the game, like early second quarter. Not
so they shouldn't have been.
They
should have been gassed. Everybody should have been
right.
Yeah.
This is when you're supposed to be relatively fresh,
right?
And you guys are already just getting beat up in an area that you had previously dominated and set the tone in the last 3 years. I said this is going to be an ugly result after that.
Right.
And it gave me a ton of confidence as an Ohio State fan, knowing that the biggest reason that Ohio State hasn't beaten this team the last 3 years, not related to Stallions, is that they just have gotten beaten in the trenches every game straight up. I can realistically see that not being the case now, not only after, I mean, again, it was against Western Michigan, so we'll see if the offensive line can continue to improve. But the fact that they improved from the Akron game to the Western Michigan game within a week already is a sign of, impressive progress in its own right. But the fact that Michigan had that dramatic of a drop-off at that critical moment of the game this early in the season, it really, I think, spoke a lot of volumes about where their, not only their defense is at, but where their entire team is at.
Yeah,
this is a far weaker unit than what has been out there the last 4 years. And I think a lot of teams, not just Texas and not just hopefully Ohio State, but some other ones along the way, as we were looking at on their schedule pre-show, are ideally going to be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think USC, Lincoln Riley can call a play. You know what I mean? If Steve Sarkisian can dice them up with mostly 5 to 7 yard passes, then I feel like Lincoln Riley can do the same thing. Dylan Gabriel at Oregon that's his game, man. He can do that. They got to go to Illinois, which does not look like a gimme anymore. Then of course you got Ohio State. So I don't know. This is going to be a very interesting season for them. Their offense. Here's the other element to all this is the fact that last year they could rely on their offense to give them 7, 8, 9-minute drives, right? That they could sustain forever. They would run 3, 4, 5 yards at a time and just eat up entire quarters, right? Where their defense only had to actually be on the field for 4 or 5 drives and a half, maybe. They don't have that luxury anymore, right? You just pointed out this is well before they were getting gassed, but this is another element to it that makes it even harder for them, that they've got to they're on the field so much. They're going to have to do so much rotation. They just don't have the depth. That's
another good point.
Yeah, they don't have the depth for it. And they lost Rod Moore to an injury. Keon Sabb at the safety position is gone. He transferred to Alabama. They've got issues, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they try to adapt around those. Now, I think Sherrone Moore is I think he's, if he's not a good coach now, I think he will eventually be a good coach, but they just don't have the personnel or the dogs, and it's, they're going to have to make some drastic improvements.
But it makes you wonder, after the run that he had late stages of last year, how did that guy that was capable of making an impression to get this job,
well,
how could he possibly be in this state now where major media Michigan members are softly advocating for his dismissal 2 games into the season?
What's different? And so Kate Stover was actually,
is he not working with now that he previously had access to?
Kate Stover was asked about this, about Michigan, and By the way, before I get to Cade Stover, shout out to J.K. Dobbins for saying that they were going to have to vacate all those wins while he's on the team. Like that
within
Jim Harbaugh
24 hours of getting a game ball from Jim Harbaugh, he says
he's like, they're going to vacate all those wins. Don't worry about it. Oh my God.
J.K. Dobbins, all the goodwill he had, he's about to cede like 10 carries to Gus Edwards for that statement.
Hey, shout out to JK for keeping it super real. I freaking love that. That's so awesome. I'm glad I didn't forget about that because that was one of the funniest things I saw this weekend.
I feel like both of them recognize that they have to really, like, he's making jokes about it in the same way that I'm sure Harbaugh probably jokes about it when he's asked about it.
Right. They don't care.
I think they both, they care, but I think that they recognize that for the sake of, them making a successful professional relationship there, they just have to kind of not let it affect what their current goals are on the Chargers.
There are bigger things that they're thinking.
Because that photo of Harbaugh like embracing and giving the ball to J.K. Dobbins is you just can't deny it's such an obscure picture.
It's weird.
J.K. Dobbins in 3 games against Michigan ran for almost 350 yards and 5 touchdowns and beat that guy 3 times.
Yeah.
There's no way that before taking this job, Jim Harbaugh had a positive opinion of J.K. Dobbins. Yeah. There's just no way.
Yeah, it's wild what the NFL does. Cade Stover was asked about like Michigan and whatnot, and he said that they had called out a play that Ohio State had never run before. And if you watch the play that he's talking about, like it's clear that they key on him immediately. Now, granted, the devil's advocate here is that, it's Cade Stover. Like, is he really
if you know the signal, then you know the play.
Well, sure, but also the fact that, like, is he really going to be blocking in like an obvious passing situation? Like, give me a break. So, so I get that. But it's interesting that the guy that he said was calling out all the plays was Rod Moore, and Rod Moore is the guy who's injured, right, for the rest of the season. So I don't know. Maybe was he the guy? Like, somebody should ask Rod Moore maybe how much he knows about Connor. I don't know. So anyway, that was Michigan getting blown up. That was fun. A few more things before we get out of here. Other items of note: Notre Dame losing to NIU. It feels like Marcus Freeman manages to lose to one crappy team every single year. And if it's not NIU, it's Marshall or some other team, which I'm not sad about. I mean, it sucks because I like Marcus Freeman. I think he's a good dude, but also, like, I don't know. Like, you can't do that if you want to be a top 5 team. Like, that's ludicrous. That's the biggest upset win in NIU's history.
It was hard for me to enjoy the one last year because it's like you said, we in most circumstances are rooting for folks attached to Ohio State to do well.
Yeah.
Even so, it's put me in an interesting position because, I mean, the joke that I would hear all the time growing up is that the number one rivalry in college football is Ohio State, Michigan. And then after that, it's Notre Dame versus the world.
Sure. Right.
So it's weird to be in a position where it's like, I can softly cheer for Notre Dame's success because it reflects well on Marcus Freeman. I couldn't really enjoy that one last year the way that I can enjoy this one because growing up in Chicago, I know how deep the Notre Dame alumni base is there.
Yeah.
And the fact that all those people are going to have to hear it from NIU the rest of their life, who they've been almost assuredly looking down on for their entire lives.
Of course.
And now the narrative is totally flipped. I mean, it is a terrible time to be a fan of college football in the North Chicago suburbs. Right?
Also, this was actually a week ago, but it was like, after our recording, but Florida State got taken out by Boston College. That's fun and good because now Florida State, which was a preseason favorite to make some noise in the playoff, has now like essentially played themselves out of it. Like, and people were saying, well, no, you get so many chances now because there's 12 teams. Maybe not anymore. Maybe Florida State's kind of just done, which is funny to me.
Are we cheering for Bill O'Brien's success?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. Boston College, sure, whatever. He can be successful. I don't care.
I guess if he does poorly, it would have been like, people could have said, oh my God, Ryan Day got bailed out of making a terrible hiring decision.
I still think he ended up with a better end of that.
Oh, I do too. I mean, Chip's been great through 2 weeks.
I'm not sad about that. Colorado got skunked by Nebraska, which looks much improved, and Dylan Raiola is doing his Patrick Mahomes impression, which is fine. Like, I guess it's working out for him. Deion Sanders, it's become more obvious than ever that he's just kind of using, that job as a platform to increase his son's draft stock, which I guess mission accomplished, but
and rap career.
And rap career, which, in Colorado came out and they said, no, it's not that we have to play his son's rap song and not like, it's not that we have to play his son's rap song instead of the fight song.
Time.
Yeah. It's not that we have to play his son's rap song instead of the fight song. It's that we have to play his son's rap song before the fight song. Get it right, guys. Gosh. which is absurd. But also very funny.
Just imagine if Ryan Day put the best damn band in the land on mute in favor of a rap song for RJ.
From RJ Day.
Yeah. The outcry from the Buckeye fan base would be
people would be pretty angry. That would be not something I think
that is what Colorado is dealing with at this stage.
Yeah, right. And also
I don't know what kind of rep the Buffs band has, but the point is it's not good vibes.
It's a bad look. It's bad vibes. Colorado looks like a bad team. That's the other thing is like,
that's the other thing is that like we're all like let down by the fact that they won their opener, especially given how close it was. It's like, oh, they really came that close to losing to North Dakota State.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like,
you're not going to win any other games.
That's like, still an FCS team. They played pretty close to the edge.
Yeah.
Like, they're probably not going to be good regardless of what else happens. And then they go to Nebraska, and it's like, this is what a legitimate storied college football program looks like, even at their low point.
Here's my favorite stat from that game, besides the fact that there were over 20 penalties called for over 200 yards. Colorado rushed the ball 22 times for 16 yards.
We miss you, Dallin Hayden.
Yeah, I know. Like, come on, man. Now, a big part of that is because Shitter Sanders got sacked a bunch, but and Dallin Hayden, look, man, he's trying his best. 5 carries for 32 yards, but there's only so much that you can do, especially when daddy's trying to get his kid as many passes as possible to, bump his draft stock. So interesting stuff going on in Colorado there.
Do you think he gets the Florida State job?
No, God, no. For 2 reasons. First of all, he's terrible. Like, he's a bad coach. But secondly, they really hate him at Florida State. He said a lot of stuff about Florida State, like, that's been negative over the years.
I wasn't aware of that.
No, he's burned a lot of bridges down there.
Okay, that's much more of a reason for him to not get it than him being a bad coach, because we've seen Alex Grinch fail upwards into several gigs. Sure.
That's
upwards
true.
Failure is a very common pattern in this sport.
Yeah, but he has burned a lot of bridges down there, and they don't.
Okay, I was not aware of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, you should look up like some of the comments he's made. It's interesting. Okay,
it's all buried under bad comments he's made about the Colorado media.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It'd be hard to go dumpster diving.
Right. Or the one that his son's made about his own offensive line.
Yeah, how's that unit holding up, by the way? They got totally rebuilt through the portal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, great. Anyway, so that's the Dubcast this week. As I bemoaned earlier, we have a freaking bye week 2 weeks into the season, so unfortunately nothing to preview.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
it'll be a nice quiet weekend. You can enjoy the week 3 slate stress free.
Yeah, what is there any
got a UFC pay-per-view on Saturday night? It'll be a great time for you guys to tune in if you're a casual fan, because there's no Ohio State football on.
What's the biggest game? Because I thought next week was supposed to be kind of a booty.
It is. I'm going to be honest. Next week, a lot of teams are playing like their, FCS opponent tune-up game. So there's not really a lot of great. I know Backyard Brawl is on, and that game is lined within a field goal, so it should presumably be a little competitive.
Yeah.
Honestly, the best game might be Friday night. It's Arizona against Kansas State, and that might be the only matchup this week between 2 ranked teams. That's not true. Boston College plays Missouri. So if you're, if you're still wondering what might have been with Bill O'Brien, you can tune in. Maybe Bill O'Brien gets revenge for the Buckeyes for the Cotton Bowl, and
you know what?
You'll be happy with that.
I just saw one that I think is really interesting. This is relative. This is because of how Oregon has performed in the past couple games. But that Oregon State game, Oregon State's going to be pretty pissed off.
That's the Civil War, and that usually happens at the end of the season. So it's interesting that it's week 3 now, but that's because Oregon's in the Big Ten, so they wouldn't be able to play it at the end of the year anymore.
That's right.
I'm that's very interesting that game is now this early on the slate relative to how it was before. So that,
and this is Oregon State. Like, this is them.
You're
saying,
right, Johnny. I did not realize that was happening this weekend, and that's a sneaky game for them after how Oregon did against Boise State and whatever FCS team they
Idaho.
played before that, Idaho.
Right.
The team I thought was still an FBS.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, no, go look it up.
How dare you, sir? Yeah, no, that's going to be one that'll be really interesting. So I'm looking forward to that.
And that reflects an interesting trend, because now that I'm looking at the slate, there's another in-state rivalry game that used to be during rivalry week that's now happening week 3, which is Utah State, which I know isn't obviously as heralded as the Civil War will be, but it's just interesting how these conference realignments have reconfigured the slate to where these end of season rivalry games that would have been happening at the last week of November now have to be moved up all the way to the 3rd week of September, and how that can create some sneaky chaos for a lot of these schools.
Yeah,
so
that'll be a lot of fun.
Not saying Utah State's going to triumph over Utah, but
no, but I understand what you're saying.
There's plenty of instances about that for this upcoming slate, is my point. Yeah. So I think you can probably start with Boston College, Missouri on Saturday, because that's close to a nooner. Mm-hmm. And then you'll be able to watch the Civil War after that between Oregon and Oregon State. And Arizona, Kansas State is Friday night. So that and BC versus Mizzou are your 2 games between ranked opponents this week. So there's a little bit more going. There's no, top 5, top 10 clashes or anything. But if you're a college football junkie, there's still plenty of stuff to appreciate this coming weekend, and it's stress-free if you're an Ohio State fan. So what's not to like about that?
There you go. All right, so that's the Dubcast for this week. We'll be back next week to talk about all that, not Ohio State football, but all those games, and talk about upcoming Ohio State games that they'll actually play. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.